I never thought I'd become the type of husband who checks his wife's phone. But life has a funny way of making us do things we never planned. My name is Tommy, I'm 37 years old and I work as a manager at a large logistics company in Dallas. My wife Louisa is a marketing specialist at one of the local firms. Or at least that's what I thought until the day everything changed forever. It all started with something small. Louisa told me she was going to a corporate retreat in Austin for the weekend. Nothing unusual, she often had these trips. But something was bothering me. Maybe it was the way she avoided my gaze when she packed her suitcase, or how she seemed unusually nervous about a routine work trip. The first red flag should have been when she spent an extra hour getting ready that Friday morning. She'd never put that much effort into her appearance for a work event before. But I brushed it off, thinking maybe there were important clients attending. On Saturday evening, I decided to call her. She answered after several rings and I could hear familiar noise in the background. Music, people talking, the typical sounds of a hotel bar or restaurant. "Hey honey, how are things?" Her voice sounded slightly strained, like she was forcing cheerfulness. "Everything's good. How's the corporate retreat? Where are you guys right now?" I asked, genuinely curious about her day. "Oh, we're at the Marriott downtown Austin. We just finished dinner, now we're relaxing a bit at the bar. You know how these things go." Her answer seemed practiced, too smooth. But here's where things get interesting and where my world completely turned upside down. You see, we have a family account on a location tracking app. We set it up after her car broke down in the middle of a dark road last year, and we wanted to always know where each other was for safety reasons. It had been incredibly useful several times when one of us was running late or needed help. And when I checked her location after that phone call, my entire world collapsed. She wasn't in Austin. She was in Miami, Florida, at the Fontainebleau Hotel. At first, I thought it was a glitch in the app. These things happen, right? GPS can be unreliable sometimes. But I refreshed it several times, checked my internet connection, even restarted my phone. The little blue dot showing Louisa's location remained stubbornly planted in Miami, over 1,300 miles away from where she claimed to be. I sat in my recliner, staring at my phone screen, feeling my heart beating somewhere in my throat. Why would she lie? And what the hell was she doing in Miami? More importantly, who was she with? The questions kept multiplying in my head like a virus. How long had this been going on? Were all those business trips actually secret getaways? Had I been living with a stranger for months, maybe years? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blue dot in Miami mocking me. I kept checking the app obsessively, hoping it would suddenly correct itself and show her in Austin where she belonged. But it never did. The next morning, I did something that might seem crazy to some people, but felt perfectly logical to me in that moment. I called the Fontainebleau Hotel directly. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number, but I had to know the truth. "Good morning, Fontainebleau Hotel, how may I help you?" "Good morning. I'd like to leave a note for my wife, she's staying with you. Luisa Martinez room?" I started improvising, hoping they wouldn't ask for specifics. "One moment please." After a pause that felt like eternity, "Yes, she's staying with us. Which room would you like to leave the note for?" My heart stopped completely. She was really there. The woman I'd been married to for 5 years, who I trusted completely, was lying to my face while staying at a luxury hotel in Miami with God knows who. "Just have it delivered when she checks out tomorrow. Write this: Dear Louisa, I hope your Austin business trip is going wonderfully. With love, Tommy." The hotel employee paused, clearly confused. "Sir, but you just said she was in Austin." "Just deliver the note, please." I hung up before she could ask more questions. Now here's where things get really interesting. What happened next changed everything. I spent the rest of Sunday planning. Not plotting some elaborate revenge scheme, but thinking through the practical steps I needed to take to protect myself. Because one thing had become crystal clear: my marriage was over. The woman I thought I knew had been systematically deceiving me, and there was no coming back from that. First I called our bank. We had a joint checking account where both our paychecks were deposited, but I also maintained a personal savings account that she rarely accessed. I spoke to a customer service representative and explained that I needed to transfer funds and modify account access due to security concerns. Within an hour, I had moved every penny from our joint account into my personal account and put a temporary hold on her debit card. Then I called my lawyer. Mike Henderson had handled our house purchase 3 years ago, and I knew he also dealt with family law. When I explained the situation, he was surprisingly sympathetic and efficient. "Tommy, I'm sorry you're going through this," he said. "But you're being smart by protecting your assets first. How do you want to proceed?" "I want divorce papers drawn up immediately. No fault, but I want to move fast. She can have the car, we'll split the house proceeds 50-50, but I want this done quickly and cleanly. I can have preliminary papers ready by Monday evening. Are you sure you don't want to try counseling first? Mike, she's been lying to me about business trips while she's actually in Miami with another man. There's nothing to counsel. That evening I got the call I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Louisa's voice was shaking with panic and confusion. Tommy, what the hell does that note mean? What note, sweetheart? I made my voice as innocent as possible, though my heart was pounding. You know what note? About Austin. When did you? Oh, that note. Well, I just wanted to show support for your corporate retreat in Austin. Strange that it reached you in Miami though. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to figure out how much I knew and how she could possibly explain this away. I can explain everything. She finally started, her voice barely a whisper. No need to explain, I interrupted. But there's something else you should know. What are you talking about? Now her voice was getting higher, more panicked. Try checking out of your hotel, Louisa. Or paying for a taxi to the airport. I hung up and turned off my phone. What followed was exactly what I'd anticipated, but it was still satisfying to watch unfold. Through our mutual friend Jessica, who worked at Miami International Airport, I learned the whole sorry story over the next few days. Louisa couldn't check out of the hotel because her card was declined. She couldn't get a taxi to the airport for the same reason. She had about $40 in cash, which wouldn't even cover the tip for a 1,300-mile journey home. The hotel held her luggage until she could settle her bill. According to Jessica, who saw the whole thing, Louisa had a complete meltdown in the hotel lobby. She was crying, making frantic phone calls, and eventually had to call someone, presumably her lover, to come back and help her. Can you imagine the humiliation? Having to return to the same man she'd been cheating with, the man she'd been lying to me about, and ask him for money to get home to the husband she'd been betraying. The irony was almost poetic. But here's what makes it even better, and I found this out later from the same friend, the guy she was with wasn't thrilled about having to bail her out. Apparently, their romantic weekend getaway turned into a very awkward financial rescue mission. Nothing kills the mood quite like your married girlfriend needing you to pay her bills because her husband found out about your affair. It took her 2 days to get home. 2 days of having to depend on a man who was probably starting to question whether a relationship with a married woman was worth this kind of drama. 2 days of knowing that I knew everything and that she had no idea what would be waiting for her when she got back to Dallas. I used those 2 days productively. I packed up all her belongings, clothes, personal items, photos, everything that belonged to her, and put them neatly in boxes in the garage. I changed the locks on the house. I opened my own checking account at a different bank entirely. And most importantly, I picked up those divorce papers from Mike. When she finally returned home on Tuesday afternoon, first flying back to Miami to get money from her boyfriend, then catching a flight to Dallas, then taking a taxi that he probably paid for, the divorce papers were waiting for her on the kitchen table. I heard her key trying the front door first. When it didn't work, she started knocking, then pounding, then calling my name. I let her sweat it out for about 10 minutes before I opened the door. She looked terrible. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was smeared from crying, and she had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept in days. She was carrying that same suitcase she'd packed so carefully on Friday morning, when she thought she was going to have a perfect secret weekend. "Tommy?" she said tentatively, like she wasn't sure if I was going to slam the door in her face. "Hey there, sweetheart. How was the business trip in Austin?" Her face went even paler if that was possible. She pushed past me into the house, dragging her suitcase behind her, and stopped dead when she saw the papers on the kitchen table. "What is this?" she whispered, though we both knew exactly what it was. "Divorce papers. I already signed them. Your turn." She picked up the papers with shaking hands, scanning the first page. "Tommy, we need to talk. This isn't what you think." "It's exactly what I think, Louisa. And you know what? I'm not even angry anymore. I'm grateful." She looked at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "Grateful that you showed me who you really are before we wasted any more years on each other. Grateful that we don't have kids who would have to go through this. Grateful that I found out now instead of 10 years from now." She started crying then, big sobbing tears that might have moved me a week ago but now just seemed like manipulation. "Tommy, please let me explain. It's not what you think. I never meant for this to happen." "Explain what?" "That you lied to me about going to Austin when you were actually in Miami with another man? That you've been doing this for months, maybe longer? That every time you told me about a business trip, or corporate retreat, you were actually meeting up with him? Her sobbing got louder. I didn't want this to happen. I love you, Tommy. I love you so much. No, Louisa. You don't love me. People who love each other don't lie every day. They don't sneak around behind each other's backs. They don't plan elaborate deceptions involving fake business trips to different states. I walked over to the table and placed a pen next to the papers. Sign them. I'm being more than fair. You can keep the car, we'll split the house sale 50-50, and I won't ask for alimony even though I make more than you do. It's more than you deserve, but I want this over quickly and cleanly. She stared at the papers, then at me, then back at the papers. What if I don't sign? Then my lawyer files for divorce without your consent, and it gets messy and expensive in public. You'll end up with much less, and everyone we know will hear all the details in court documents. Your choice. You know what the worst part was? Not the anger or the hurt, though those were there. It was the complete absence of feeling I had for her. This woman I'd lived with for 5 years, who I'd made love to, who I'd shared dreams and plans with, had become a complete stranger to me in the span of a weekend. She tried every tactic she could think of. Crying, pleading, promising it would never happen again, claiming it was just a mistake, insisting that she loved me and wanted to work things out. But it was all just noise to me now. How long? I finally asked. What? How long have you been seeing him? She looked down at her hands. 6 months. 6 months of lying to my face every single day. It wasn't supposed to happen. We met at a conference in Houston and we just connected. I tried to stop it, Tommy, I really did. But you didn't stop it. You made a choice to continue it. You made a choice every time you booked a hotel room with him. You made a choice every time you came home and kissed me after being with him. You made a choice every time you looked me in the eyes and lied. She had no answer for that because there was no answer. The whole thing took about 3 hours. 3 hours to dismantle 5 years of marriage, to divide up our possessions, to sign papers that would legally separate us forever. It should have been more dramatic, more emotional, but mostly it was just administrative. She signed the papers around 8 o'clock that evening. Her hands were still shaking and she kept stopping to cry, but she signed them. By 9 o'clock, she was loading her boxed belongings into the car that was now officially hers. Where will you go? I asked, not because I cared but because it seemed like the polite thing to ask. My sister's in Houston. At least for a while. She stood by the car for a moment, looking back at the house we'd bought together, the place where we'd planned to build a life. Tommy, I really am sorry. I know you don't believe me, but I am. I believe you're sorry, I said. I just don't think you're sorry about the right things. She drove away that night and I never saw her again. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. We sold the house within a month. The Dallas market was hot, and we made a decent profit even after realtor fees and closing costs. I took my half and bought a downtown condo with a view of the skyline. New place, new life, no memories of her anywhere. Did she continue seeing the businessman from New York? I honestly don't know and don't care. Jessica mentioned once that she'd heard Louisa was single again, but I didn't ask for details. That part of my life was over, completely and permanently. The whole experience taught me something important about myself. I'm not the kind of person who believes in second chances when it comes to betrayal. Some people might call that harsh or unforgiving, but I call it self-respect. She had a choice every single day for 6 months, and every single day she chose to lie to me. Friends occasionally ask me if I think I was too harsh. Freezing her bank cards when she was 1,300 miles from home, forcing her to go back to her lover for money, serving her with divorce papers before she even had a chance to explain herself. They wonder if maybe I should have given her an opportunity to end the affair and work on our marriage. But here's what I always tell them. She had every opportunity to be honest with me. She had 6 months of opportunities. Every morning when she woke up next to me, every evening when she came home from work, every time she said, "I love you," those were all opportunities to tell me the truth. Instead, she chose deception. She chose to plan elaborate lies about business trips. She chose to look me in the eyes and tell me she was going to Austin when she was actually going to Miami. She chose to let me worry about her safety when she didn't answer her phone quickly, not knowing she was probably too busy with another man to respond. The revenge wasn't just about the money or the humiliation, though those elements were certainly satisfying. The real revenge was showing her that actions have consequences, that trust, once broken, can't be repaired with apologies and tears. Some nights, especially in the beginning, I'd lie awake in my new condo and wonder what she was doing. Was she thinking about me? Did she regret her choices? Was she trying to rebuild her life the way I was rebuilding mine? But those thoughts became less frequent over time. I started dating again about 4 months after the divorce was final. Nothing serious at first, just casual dinners and movies with women I met through friends or at work events. It felt strange at first, being single again at 37, but also liberating. I discovered I'd forgotten what it felt like to be with someone who wasn't constantly hiding something from me. The relief of not having to wonder where someone really was, not having to question every business trip or late evening at the office, was incredible. About a year later I met Sarah. She's a teacher at one of the local elementary schools, divorced herself with an 8-year-old daughter named Emma. She understands what betrayal feels like, what it means to have to rebuild your entire life from scratch. Our relationship developed slowly, built on complete honesty from the beginning. We both learned the hard way that trust isn't something you get automatically in a relationship, it's something you build deliberately, day by day, choice by choice. Sarah knows the whole story about Louisa. I told her everything on our third date, because I figured she deserved to know what she was getting into with someone who had such a recent and dramatic divorce. Her response surprised me. "Good for you," she said simply. "You respected yourself enough to walk away instead of trying to fix something that was fundamentally broken." That's when I knew she was different. Someone who understood that self-respect isn't selfish, that some betrayals are too significant to overcome, that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away completely. Emma and I get along great. She's a smart, funny kid who loves dinosaurs and hates Brussels sprouts. Sometimes when I'm helping her with homework or teaching her to ride her bike without training wheels, I think about how different my life would be if Louisa and I had had children together. The divorce would have been infinitely more complicated, more painful, more drawn out. There would have been custody battles and child support and having to see Louisa regularly for the next decade or more. The clean break I was able to make would have been impossible. So in a strange way, I'm grateful that we never had kids. Not because I don't want children. Emma has shown me that I love being around kids and would enjoy being a father someday. But because it allowed me to close that chapter of my life completely and start fresh. 2 years after the divorce, I got a letter from Louisa. It was forwarded through my lawyer, since she didn't have my new address. In it, she apologized again and said she'd been going to therapy to understand why she'd made such destructive choices. She said she hoped I was happy and asked if we could meet for coffee to talk. I threw the letter away without finishing it. Some people might think that was cold or unnecessarily cruel. But I didn't owe her closure or forgiveness or a chance to ease her guilt by apologizing one more time. I'd moved on completely, and she was part of a past I had no interest in revisiting. The truth is, betrayal like that changes you fundamentally. Not necessarily in a bad way but in a permanent way. I'll never again be the trusting, somewhat naive person I was before I discovered her lies. I'm more cautious now, more observant, more willing to ask direct questions and demand honest answers. Some might see that as cynicism, but I see it as wisdom. I learned that people are capable of maintaining elaborate deceptions for months or years while looking you in the face and telling you they love you. That's a valuable lesson even if it was painful to learn. I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. The Tommy from 3 years ago might have tried to work things out, might have believed her promises to change, might have convinced himself that love could overcome betrayal. But that Tommy would have been setting himself up for more heartbreak down the road. The Tommy I am now knows that some lines once crossed can't be uncrossed. Some trust once broken can't be rebuilt. And some people, no matter how much you think you love them, will choose their own selfish desires over your relationship every single time. These days, I rarely think about Louisa or that weekend when my life imploded and then rebuilt itself. When I do think about it, it's usually with a sense of gratitude rather than bitterness. She could have kept lying for years longer. She could have waited until we had children or a bigger mortgage or more complicated lives to unravel. Instead, her carelessness with that location app gave me the information I needed to make a clean break at the right time. Her assumption that I would never check up on her, never question her stories, never think to call a hotel in Miami, turned out to be her undoing. But there's something I didn't mention earlier, something that happened about 6 months after our divorce was finalized. I was having lunch with my colleague Brad when he casually mentioned seeing Louisa at a grocery store in Houston. She looked rough, he said, like someone who'd been through a difficult time. According to Brad, she was alone, looked like she'd lost weight, and seemed to be struggling financially based on the generic brands she was buying. He said she asked about me, whether I was doing okay, if I was seeing anyone. Brad, being a good friend, told her simply that I was doing well and left it at that. Part of me felt a momentary twinge of something, not sympathy exactly, but perhaps acknowledgement that her actions had consequences for her too. But mostly I felt vindicated. She'd made her choices and now she was living with the results. Around the same time, I learned through mutual friends that her relationship with the businessman from New York had ended badly. Apparently, once the excitement of their affair wore off and he realized what kind of person he was actually dealing with, someone who would lie and cheat on their spouse for months, he decided she wasn't relationship material after all. Shocking, right? The pattern of behavior that destroyed our marriage turned out to be just as unappealing to him once he was on the receiving end of it. There's something poetic about that. The very qualities that made her willing to cheat with him made her unsuitable to be with him long term. I also discovered that several of our mutual friends had suspected something was going on but didn't know how to tell me. Jessica, the friend who worked at the airport, admitted she'd seen Louisa at Miami International months before the final incident, but thought maybe it was work-related and didn't want to cause problems if she was wrong. I should have said something, she told me over coffee one afternoon. But I kept thinking maybe there was an innocent explanation. Don't beat yourself up about it, I replied. It wasn't your job to police my marriage. Besides, if it hadn't been that weekend, it would have been another one. The truth has a way of coming out eventually. And that's really the lesson in all of this. Deception, especially elaborate deception like Louisa's, is incredibly difficult to maintain indefinitely. The more lies you tell, the more complicated the web becomes, and eventually something gives way. In her case, it was forgetting about the location app we'd set up for safety reasons. The irony is perfect when you think about it. The very technology we'd installed to keep each other safe and connected became the instrument that revealed her betrayal. She'd gotten so comfortable with her lies, so confident in her ability to deceive me, that she forgot about the one thing that could expose her instantly. What really strikes me now, 3 years later, is how much stronger I am because of what happened. Not stronger in spite of the betrayal, but stronger because of how I chose to handle it. I didn't beg her to stay. I didn't try to compete with her lover. I didn't attempt to fight for our marriage. Instead, I recognized that someone who could lie to my face every day for 6 months, who could plan elaborate deceptions and carry them out flawlessly, wasn't someone I wanted to be married to regardless of whether she ended the affair or not. The betrayal wasn't just about the other man, it was about the fundamental dishonesty that made the affair possible. Sarah often tells me she admires how I handled the situation. Most people would have given her a chance to explain, tried to work things out, she says. But you saw immediately that the real problem wasn't the affair itself, it was the kind of person who could maintain that level of deception. She's right. The Louisa who could look me in the eyes every morning and tell me she loved me while planning her next secret trip to Miami was not someone who'd suddenly become trustworthy just because she got caught. If anything, her immediate response, trying to manipulate me with tears and promises rather than taking full responsibility, proved that she still didn't understand the magnitude of what she'd done. That's why I have no regrets about the way I handled things. Swift, decisive, final. No drawn-out discussions about whether we could work through this. No months of counseling trying to rebuild trust that had been systematically destroyed. No wondering whether she was really where she said she was every time she left the house. Sometimes people ask me if I miss being married to her, if there were good times I regret losing. Of course there were good times, 5 years of marriage isn't all bad moments. But here's what I've learned. Those good times were based on a lie. Every happy memory from the last 6 months of our marriage was tainted by the knowledge that she was actively deceiving me during that entire period. How can you miss something that was fundamentally false? How can you mourn the loss of a relationship that existed only because one person was lying to the other? The Louisa I thought I was married to, honest, faithful, trustworthy, never actually existed during those final months. I was in love with an illusion. The real Louisa was someone who could plan secret trips, create elaborate cover stories, and maintain 2 completely separate emotional lives without apparent difficulty. That's not someone I would have chosen to marry if I'd known who she really was. And that, ultimately, is what made my revenge so satisfying. It wasn't just about humiliating her or making her life difficult for a weekend. It was about forcing her to experience the consequences of her choices immediately and completely. No gradual realization, no slow discovery process, no opportunity to minimize or explain away her actions. One moment she was living her double life successfully, the next moment both lives collapsed simultaneously. The security she thought she had with me was gone, and the exciting affair that seemed so worth the risk turned into a liability when her lover had to deal with the practical consequences of her deception. The revenge I got wasn't just about the immediate satisfaction of watching her scramble to get home without access to our money. It was about reclaiming my life, my self-respect, and my future. It was about refusing to be anyone's fool, even someone I'd promised to love forever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply refusing to tolerate unacceptable behavior and walking away with your dignity intact. Sometimes it's showing someone that their actions have consequences they didn't anticipate. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, that revenge leads you to a better life than you ever imagined possible. A life built on honesty instead of lies, respect instead of manipulation, and genuine love instead of convenient deception. That's the life I have now with Sarah and Emma. That's the life Louisa's betrayal, ironically, made possible. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.